house can look like a dream until you dig into the details. Liens, repairs, or a bad location can turn it into a nightmare. Due diligence is your flashlight in the dark. And that is Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and some would say a very successful real estate investor. And with that...
I know him best from Shark Tank. My bad.
You know him from Shark I never watched the show, so I don't know what is ever on Shark Tank. But with that, welcome to the House Einstein podcast. This is House Einstein podcast 68. I am your host, Osman Parvez, the founder of the House Einstein brokerage based in Boulder, Colorado. Born and bred and raised up to be an adult in Boulder, Colorado. That's the brokerage, not me. We are founded and born in Boulder, is what I'm trying to say. And with me is Hamish.
Yes, and I was not born and bred in Boulder.
Bred was probably not what I wanted to say, and it just rolled off my tongue. I don't know why.
It's people be saying that more and more often, so I don't know, maybe it's normalizing. But yeah, I help the brokerage and keep the brokerage successful to be an adult in Boulder.
House Einstein is a Boulder native. We can lord that over all the other brokerages and put it on the back of our cars so that people know.
That's right.
That it's native.
On the back of our Carhartts?
On the back of our cars. You don't see those native bumper stickers that people have?
Maybe we get a decal for the office.
Maybe, or maybe we don't.
Okay, good talk. Fantastic. Well, I missed you last week, listeners, but we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast.
Right, we skipped a week unintentionally.
Yeah,
there was a window of opportunity to record the podcast, and due to the background noise and other location-specific issues, we just decided to pull it and push it forward a week. So here we are. And as you can tell from our intro, the core topic of this week's podcast is about due diligence. And we're going to frame it up in a way that I have previously done in the blog for House Einstein, but we've never really framed it this way for the podcast. And I think it's a very important way to consider conducting due diligence, what stages you conduct, what order should you be doing your due diligence in. So we're going to dive pretty deep into that. Our mission at the House Einstein podcast is to entertain you primarily. This is an entertainment podcast, even though we do talk a lot about real estate. This podcast should not be the basis for your real estate decisions. If you are looking for a real estate advisor and you're looking here in Colorado, please reach out to us. We are at houseeinstein.com, and we are more than happy to serve you, particularly if you have a pre-existing relationship with one of our agents on the team. And for everyone else, well, enjoy the entertainment, but please don't sue us because you made a bad investment decision, because you are responsible, ultimately, for all of your successes or failures when you are purchasing or selling real estate.
I like the way you said that one. Good little disclaimer there.
I feel like I say it differently every single time, but the bottom line is the same. This podcast is...
It keeps it fresh.
Yeah, maybe. But this podcast is entertainment. And my background prior to getting into the world of real estate was investment analysis. And I stumbled into real estate as a profession. I've now been doing it for over 20 years, most of which was right here in Boulder. And also, of course, we covered Denver to Fort Collins and a little bit of the mountain towns. But Boulder is our bread and butter and our core focus area. And Hamish, what do you do around here?
Oh, I turn on the light switches at the start of the day and turn them off at the end of the night. And, I help the agents out. I'm a licensed broker, licensed agent, and so I'll help the agents draft and prepare contracts. So I'll help with the deal process and also cover for showings when necessary, and a little bit of a creative too. So I'll take the listing photos and put together the flashy listing videos you see on our YouTube as well. House Einstein also there.
Hamish is a jack of many trades. So you've heard about our
That's right.
You've heard about our core topic, and now let me tell you about what else we'll be discussing in this podcast. We're going to dive into a little bit of market conditions, specifically in Denver. The Denver Post actually just had a article that talked about market conditions for January, but they smushed together attached dwellings and detached dwellings and then told you what the data statistics were for the combination of both of them, which is sort of useless information because you've smushed together two very different types of property. We're just going to talk about attached dwellings for this particular podcast, although we could talk about single-family detached as well. But for the interest of time, we're only going to talk about attached dwellings. And we'll do a little bit of shameless self-promotion about a new listing that we have coming on. We will cover 4 sales of the week. Sales of the week are sales we believe are notable. These are very important sales to consider for specific types of property or locations, price ranges, and sometimes just because we think they're a cool property and want to talk about the deal and what might have transpired in the deal. As a licensee in the state of Colorado who adheres by all the rules and regulations, I can't talk about active listings in a public forum. That is prohibited. The only place we discuss active listings is in our client-oriented newsletter. And to get that newsletter, you have to sign up. We have to get your contact information. And in my discussions with our regulators who came down on me a few years ago, that's an acceptable approach to handling a situation where we're not supposed to be talking about active listings. So for this podcast, we're only talking about notable sales. If you'd like to hear about our thoughts on active listings and you don't already have a client relationship, just check out our newsletter. If you have a client relationship, send me an email, send me a smoke signal, text me, call me, even better. I'm old school, just call me, and I'm more than happy to jump on a call with you and look online and give you the top level analysis of an active listing. And then we'll wrap it up with our second to last segment, which is in the news. We'll be talking about a little bit of AI. We'll be talking about a little bit of news that's local to here in the city of Boulder, including a new study that the city just released that they spent almost $80,000 on to analyze what's happening with homeless here in the city, to provide counsel with data and statistics and studies, or at least summarize those studies. And then our last piece in the news is about how some communities in Colorado are fighting the state level mandates on housing density. And then to complete our entertainment journey for you today, we've got our usual segment on Carveouts, where we talk about anything and everything briefly that Hamish and I might have an interest in discussing. And Hamish, I'm looking at your topic, so I look forward to seeing how you cover that. What you have planned to talk about, which I have no idea what you're talking about. But
it might need to be rewritten, but yeah, we'll say it on the pod.
We'll find out. All right, that's our plan for this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and here we go.
Perfect. Well, due diligence. Yeah, let's have a little break. I mean, a lot of really fun energy on that one. Cool. Yeah, I'm ready to jump in.
This podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We serve buyers and sellers in Colorado, focusing on Boulder, Denver, and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our mission is simple: help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more. Okay, let's talk about due diligence. First and foremost, I divide up real estate due diligence into 3 stages. The stages that occur, the items that you should be exploring before you even write an offer. So before you are sitting down with your agent, or maybe you're writing an offer for yourself, or maybe you're, God forbid, having the seller write the offer for you, or the seller's agent write the offer for you. This is before you do that, before you are inking something, this is what you should be doing to better understand what you're writing an offer on. Stage 2 due diligence occurs. They're non-physical things that occur once you are under contract. It's primarily due diligence that is in Colorado. There's a section of the contract that covers a lot of these items. They kind of group together very nicely. We're going to talk about what those items are. And then there's stage 3 due diligence, which are what most people think of due diligence. And that is your primary inspection, your secondary inspection, and sometimes getting contractor estimates. And we'll walk you through what all of these stages entail, and in a narrative that hopefully is not too long, maybe about 20 minutes or so, Hamish. You can watch the clock and interrupt me with questions. And
we'll see about 20 minutes, yeah.
You interrupt me with questions, interrupt me with your own experiences as we go through this. Hamish sees more deals in a single year than the vast majority of agents do, and he's been with us for several years, so he has a lot of experience in helping us conduct our due diligence. One of the key distinctions I should mention before we really jump into this much further is that due diligence is not a normal duty of a realtor to their buyer. And it is so carved out from the real estate brokerage or agency profession that the lawyers tell you you shouldn't say anything about due diligence, lest you be sued for having missed something. And meanwhile, our brokerage, House Einstein, has gone 180 degrees from that philosophy. And our philosophy is, how can we help you do your due diligence better? And that's why it's House Einstein. That's why our goal is to help you make a smart decision. And the attorney for our brokerage, one of the attorneys for our brokerage, was aghast at this entire concept and advised me, this is a long time ago, 14 years ago, said, you should not be doing this. And I said, I know, but I have all this experience showing homes, helping clients navigate inspections, helping them make a smart decision. That's what the branding's about, and that's what I want to do. So we came up with some verbiage to write into our agency agreements around due diligence that makes it very clear that even though House Einstein and me particularly have chops in this area, have skills in this area, and will do what we can to assist you, you acknowledge two things as a client. One, it's not a normal duty, and two, you are still responsible for the outcome, and that you will hold us harmless in the event that you miss something, which you always miss something, by the way. No matter how thorough your due diligence, you will miss something. And
I'll be talking about that too a bit later.
Okay, and hopefully what you missed is not something that destroys the value of your investment, but it could happen. Real estate investing is not for the faint of heart. There is no risk-free investment, and whether you're buying for your personal family and your needs, or maybe a vacation home, your primary or secondary home, or you're buying an investment property, the due diligence is very similar. There's just some additional due diligence you should be doing for the investment property that you may not care to do for a primary home.
I think fortunately too, we're under contract on an investment property for a buyer, so that's fairly top of mind for us too.
That's right. We get to the world of estoppel statements. So here's stage one due diligence, and I'm just going to go through this relatively quickly. So when you meet with an agent to start to look at homes, or maybe you're shopping on Zillow or Realtor.com or Homes.com, you're learning about neighborhoods. And there is so much to learn about neighborhoods. It is astounding. At House Einstein, we have our neighborhood video series where we talk about the pros and the cons, or what you need to know about each of the neighborhoods in Boulder. And we are continually updating that. You can find it on YouTube. But an agent can be a great...
Should be one this week, too. A new one coming out.
There is a new one. That's right. Ian's coming out with, finally, we're releasing Devil's Thumb, which is a neighborhood inside or above Table Mesa, you might say. And all of the specifics about that neighborhood, which there's probably only a few hundred houses in that neighborhood. And we have
255.
And you even know the number. And we have a video just about that neighborhood. So realtors can be a very good resource for learning about neighborhoods. But of course, so is driving around. And almost nothing beats on-the-ground research you yourself have done. And many of the things you can look at as you're driving around or walking around or bicycling around a neighborhood are kind of, well, in my mind, obvious, right? So there are some neighborhoods, for example, in Boulder County where the home values are much more affordable, and there are a lot more tradespeople that live in those neighborhoods. And in the evenings, you will see a lot more trade vehicles parked on the street. It's a telltale indicator. You'll also notice the spacing of the houses from each other. And that is an indication, perhaps, of when the homes were built. It is not obvious to you, which it may not be for the neighborhood, but homes that were much older, neighborhoods that are much older, the lot sizes tend to be larger, and the spaces between the neighbors, between the houses, tends to be larger. So you, of course, can do your own drive-arounds, but one of the shortcuts to this whole process is choosing the right agent to begin with, because in a 10-minute conversation, a 20-minute conversation, they can steer you towards neighborhoods that may or may not be a better fit for you. And I want to be careful about that word steer.
I was just about
Thank you, Hamish, because steering it can also be conflated with redlining or trying to direct people, even at their request, that they want to live with people of the same race or people of the same religion or people that aren't of the same race or the same religion or the same whatever. There are all these
demographic class
protected classes, and real estate agents have no business steering people towards or away from neighborhoods on the basis of that. And yes, I've had people ask for that, and I've had to tell them, we don't do that type of direction, but maybe what you're really interested in is a golf course neighborhood
that's like
seems
I don't know if it's a whistle, but
I mean, they just came out and said it, and I'm not. If it's not obvious to you from listening to the podcast, it shouldn't be from listening. But if you watch the video, I'm not white, and they said, Osman, we really would like, or my name, Osman, we really would like you to help us find a neighborhood with people like us. And then they left it vaguely undefined as people like us, and I thought, do they mean like retirees? Do they mean affluent? Do they mean skin color, which is a really frightening one to be asked to direct people towards? And I think they just meant people that
feels like a test almost.
They were people like that just wanted to live with more people in their socioeconomic group that don't have kids. And they actually happen to be golfers. So we did help them buy a property in Fort Collins that was in a golf course neighborhood. And they're lovely people. I don't think they meant it the way that some people might take that question, but you should be aware that question is very loaded, and the word steering is very loaded. But we can certainly tell you about neighborhoods without addressing protected classes, which could put us at risk of a fair housing lawsuit. So talk to real estate agents, interview them, choose the right agent, and they can make all of the rest of due diligence so much smoother. I don't think I need to say that again, but I might. So additional items to talk about besides neighborhood characteristics, which, by the way, could include where's the nearest park, where's the nearest grocery store. You should be looking at the schools. So Ham, you have Ham. Ham, I almost called you. Hamish. I only have met you today, right? Hamish, what is this Zerger Elementary story you want to talk about?
Yeah, so by my house, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't kind of like a deciding factor, but there's an elementary school, Zerger Elementary, by the house that I ended up purchasing. And I always thought, cool, I'm not looking to have kids anytime soon, but what a great resource. There's a school easily like a 5-minute walk, if not less. That school's been shut down, and it's looking at getting redeveloped into single family housing. So there's a big kind of like petition going on in the neighborhood. There's QR codes on the social trails and everything to get your voice heard, get this petition going. But that's something that I saw a school and thought, cool, good, schools don't really go anywhere. And kind of just as a note, when you're looking at schools, check to see if it's going anywhere. that's really my takeaway on that.
So how
bit of a bummer, yeah.
How would you know if it's going to be demolished?
That's
or
where I was going to defer to you.
You're
I don't know.
Oh, you defer to me. Oh, well.
Yeah. I know it's Jeffco Public Schools, but I don't know if they're very transparent about whether or not they intend to close schools or not. As an addition, the middle school that used to be open, actually when I purchased this home, shut down too this year. So there's 2 schools in my area that are gone now. And it's like, well, what gives?
Well, so
that's maybe a larger
school
thing.
Board meetings are supposed to be public, and there might be minutes that are accessible or video recordings that are accessible, but there's a shortcut to that type of due diligence, and it's one of our later items, and that's called Meet the Neighbors. And Meet the Neighbors is one of the cheapest and most effective ways to do quick due diligence at very little cost other than your time. Unfortunately, some people are very shy to meet neighbors, and so obviously I'm not shy, and I've often offered my service to my clients that let's go walk and meet the neighbors together. But usually we do that after we've already decided we're going to go write an offer, not before we're writing an offer. So meeting people is a great way. Meeting people is a great way to get to know the neighborhood and also to get to know about the local schools. And you can ask things like, how are the schools doing? Are they well attended? Have you heard anything about a school closing? And so, for example, Table Mesa, and we'll keep coming to Table Mesa because it's such a family-friendly neighborhood, it has several schools that are fantastic. And there's a risk, given the aging of Boulder's population, given the shortage of younger families due frequently to the price points, that some of those schools are going to close. And I'm not saying they will or won't, but there's definitely a non-zero chance of that happening in the future. And Boulder has already seen a number of schools close in very affluent neighborhoods, like Mapleton Hill Elementary. The Washington Street co-housing school has a beautiful co-housing development, has a beautiful school that has been converted into housing inside that historic schoolhouse. So there's a precedent for schools closing because there aren't enough young people having children in some of these neighborhoods. So 100%, if schools are really important, you may want to check in with the school itself. And what I've done, Hamish, is actually introduce people to teachers that teach in the school district, because they know what's going on at a level that parents, and frankly, parents don't, and for sure the local newspaper doesn't, and may not be obvious from finding the minutes from board meetings. I think talk to a few teachers and you'll get the answer of what's really going on. And there's another...
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at the school too closely, right? I figured I'm just looking at the house, the school being there is an added bonus. Knowing now what I know and thinking about it kind of from a longer term investment standpoint, I will be looking into schools, not necessarily even for my use, but just to see if they'll be sticking around,
Absolutely. So the longevity of the school, but I'm going to add one more piece to that. So, I'm sure you could go, like, every one of these bullets have probably a dozen sub-bullets.
Could be their own closing table.
Right? But and maybe we'll come back to them at a future date and have them be their own core topic or closing table topic. But once upon a time, I had a client almost not write an offer on a school in North Boulder because they discovered statistics that showed there was a large percentage of students that were getting subsidized lunches at this school. And they felt like that just is a bad indicator for the demographic that's served by the school, and we don't want our future child to be paired up with a bunch of children who are subsidized lunches, right? Which is sort of an elitist attitude. And I brought to their attention...
Definitely a take. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's sort of like, I don't want my kid to go to school with poor kids, right? Or become friends with poor kids. That's sort of the energy I got from this client. And I suggested that they talk to teachers about this. And they did, actually. They went to the school, too, and met with administrators. They talked to teachers. And what they discovered was that some of the schools in North Boulder serve a diverse student body. And there's a lot of other benefits that your child may get, including exposure to multicultural experiences, languages, and cultures that they wouldn't if they just attended a school of people that look just like them. And that also, some of these children are not native English speakers, and that also may be why some of their math and science scores are lower. And yes, Table Mesa elementary schools have some of the highest math and science scores in the state, but what matters more to you, and I'm not the one to make the judgment on what matters to you. I came from, of course, math and science is the most important thing on the planet. That's my parents' attitude.
STEM family, right?
Right, STEM family. We're all math and science people, and you can learn, special language or other languages, on your own.
Free time.
You already have a second language at home. You don't even speak that well.
Yeah, you had that. Yeah.
So anyway, there's more. The point I'm trying to make is that there's more to elementary and middle school and high school than test scores and data points like percentage of students that get subsidized meals. There's a lot more going on to schools, especially today. There's magnet schools that might be a much better fit for your child that may have plenty of enrollment, or there's some that are completely full, and you may be choosing to be close to a school that may not even have capacity for you. And then there's school capacity by right in certain neighborhoods, and there's also the ability to opt into schools that are not your neighborhood school. There's a lot going on with schools, and if schools are really important to you, well, bring it up with your agent.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I could keep going, and I think at some point we're going to snowball into just a really intense due diligence conversation, so we should probably move on.
We will. So let's move on. The next data point under stage 1 due diligence is crime. And there are all sorts of property crime here in Boulder, all sorts of other types of crime. And there are crime maps where you can see where crime is occurring. And
I'll link that in the pod.
Many communities have crime maps that you can utilize to try to get a sense of where crime is happening. And in some cases, it's no surprise that you are seeing petty property crime, for example, on the Hill. You're right next to the university, and there's a ton of student housings that's mixed in with non-student housing on the Hill. And when college-age children come home after a few drinks and are upset at whatever they're upset by, they might be walking on top of your car or dumping red plastic cups in your yard or leaving behind beer cans or breaking off your mirror or driving badly. I mean, I saw one.
The list goes on.
I mean, I had just bought a new car and I saw this 23-year-old back up into it on the Hill. And I'm like standing there watching her park into it. And I'm like, really? Like, there's so much room. And you just put it in reverse and smashed into the car. Luckily, the damage was pretty trivial and it was just some scratches, but it was still like,
come on,
this wouldn't happen in my neighborhood, but on the Hill,
but hand in hand, right? Yeah,
where there's very few parking garages, very little off-street parking. If you're parking on the street, you can expect your car to get some wear and tear. Is that real crime? Not really, but in Boulder there is higher crime along the bike paths in certain parts of downtown in particular, and there's lots of reasons why that's occurring. We have represented clients who have sold their property in North Boulder and bought out in Erie because the client was jumped while running by a random person who was experiencing some sort of mental health issue, and it was the end of her living in Boulder. That so disturbed her sense of safety, and running is a core component of her lifestyle. She's borderline professional runner, and that was the end of her living in Boulder. And they are very happy now to live in Erie and commute. They still love the city of Boulder, but that occurred in North Boulder. It wasn't really even. It was in a really nice neighborhood, so it was just a random
occurrence
event. But there are random events, and then there's the data that's very visible and obvious for where you're seeing the police called out to over and over again. Along Broadway, close to the homeless shelter, downtown, the Civic Park, Pearl Street, the bars late at night, the Hill.
Definitely
right?
The bars.
Anywhere on the bike path after like 8 o'clock at night, you should be prepared for potentially an interaction, because we've had some serious issues with homelessness in Boulder, and it's not, frankly, getting that much better. So the data shows it got a little better, by the way, which we'll talk about in our
we'll jump in
right at the end. But it's still something that if your agent's not willing to have a conversation with you about, you've chosen the wrong agent.
Kind of the realities. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Oh, you got property types in there. Yeah.
Property types. Let's move on. This is still stage 1 due diligence. Ranch versus bi-level versus multi-story. In my early days in the real estate profession, I didn't ask clients whether they had a preference. And we would discover together that they hated bi-levels, for example. And we would walk into our 3rd or 4th bi-level and they would suddenly say, I don't think bi-levels are for us. And they hadn't thought about it. And meanwhile, we had wasted a lot of time looking at these homes without having this discussion. And so what I know now, and I didn't know in years 1, 2, or 3, is that bi-levels don't work for a large variety of buyers. They were designed, bi-level and multi-level homes are designed in a way that maximizes the living space in a relatively small footprint. There are some advantages. The basement doesn't feel as dark, and it's better connected to the main level, but it often results in an entryway that you open the front door and boom, there's a set of stairs greeting you. And people universally don't like that feeling. And so, the majority of buyers don't like that feeling, versus a traditional 2-story house where you don't immediately see the stairs and you can look through the home toward the back and see light through the back windows of the home. That feeling is something that buyers actually prefer. And I know that if I have a bi-level listing that's overpriced and a 2-story listing that's priced right in Table Mesa, the 2-story is going to fly off the market if it's staged right, prepped right, and the bi-level may not, because of how many people, frankly, just have an aversion towards bi-levels. And then
the very real consideration, and that comes in too after, say you're cool with bi-levels. Well, when you sell it down the line, you got to remember that a certain percentage of the public doesn't like it. So you may have a little more difficulty selling it down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I like bi-levels. Look, so if you hire us as your listing agent, my job is to maximize the sale price of the house, minimize the risk, but I also want you to know the truth. And if I represented you on the buy side, you already heard it once. And when you hired me to sell it, I'm going to make sure you know that buy levels often take longer to sell. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your house. We just have to find the right buyer for the house. Ranch-style houses are incredibly in demand, particularly larger ranches, because we have so many people that are aging and are gracefully or not, and have mobility issues now or in the future. So really, the way people should be thinking about a house is not what your lifestyle is like now, but what are you going to be like in 10 years? And what is the odds, given your current health trajectory, that you're going to have a hard time going up and down stairs? And yes, it's nice to have a main floor bedroom anyway, because if you have a short-term injury, it's really nice to, like right now, Leah, I haven't told you, Hamish, my wife is, I don't want to go into too much detail, but she's spending some time with a family member who took a fall and is dealing with a broken leg. And guess what they don't have?
A ranch?
A main floor bedroom of any kind. There's no bedroom on the main. All the bedrooms are on the upper or in the basement.
Yeah, this is a real consideration for my grandparents, too. They're actively kind of weighing their options. They live in a 2-story right now and see themselves aging and know that at some point they're going to want a main floor primary, excuse me.
It's better to make that decision and find the right house 10 years before you need it than break a leg and now you're staying in the living room and have a bed in your living room because getting up and down the stairs is too painful. So it's not a bad idea for all home buyers to get a property with at least some room that can be converted into a makeshift bedroom relatively easily in the event of an injury. So those are property types, generally speaking. There's also, of course, lots of other types of property. There's farmettes. There's the question of design, and the way newer design feels much better for some people than older design, and that's actually our next one. So we're going to move right on to stage 1 due diligence, age of home. And newer homes tend to be designed in more aesthetically pleasing ways with some caveats. So historic homes that were built pre-war, I would say 1900 to 1945 is that classic period of American architecture that people adore. And if the homes have been updated or modified and expanded but maintain that aesthetic, they've addressed a lot of the functional deficits of historic homes. The wiring may have been corrected from knob and tube to something more modern. The closets could be larger. Like, it still can look historic, but it actually it's been updated inside.
Modern functional.
Yeah, you may still have small closets, but you don't have closets that are so small they're completely ridiculous. Back when those homes were built, right? People had 2 outfits.
Itsy bitsy. Yeah.
You had an outfit for the work week and an outfit for Sunday, and that was it. Like, you didn't have what we have today in our closets. So age of home is also important from an environmental perspective. Let me stay on the age of home from a design perspective for a second, and then we're going to go to the environment.
All right.
So, and I'm looking for your thoughts on this too, Hamish, because we're very different generations. But homes built in the 60s and 70s, and even into the early 80s, were not what is traditionally thought of as kind of peak design. Mid-century, like 50s, there's some classic mid-centuries.
I was going to bring up mid-century.
That is still very appealing, and in fact growing in appeal. But then the stuff in the 60s and 70s and 80s, generally speaking, is not very well designed for today's aesthetic, for what people are looking for today. And a lot of those...
From an aesthetic standpoint.
Purely from an aesthetic standpoint. Not from... I mean, you could argue the insulation was also lacking in the 70s and 80s too, and it's gotten way better through much better code. But when you start stepping into a home built in the 90s, suddenly you have this awareness that taller ceilings and open floor plans, connectivity between the living room and the kitchen and the dining room without like closed off rooms feels better. And so you have open floor plans suddenly showing up. You still see tall ceilings in gorgeous historic homes from the 1940s, like particularly the mansions from the 1940s. It's not like they weren't aware that tall ceilings make rooms feel better. But the ordinary historic home from the 40s and 50s didn't have that. It had to be a higher end home.
The grand ones.
Grand historic homes from the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s have that. And that's including the mid-century design period. But then, boom, into the 90s, you start getting much more functional homes. But today, those homes are 50 years old. and many of them have not been well maintained. They need updates, and some of them have significant issues that could have been corrected early, like with grading, but weren't, and now have structural problems. Even so, most people prefer 90s and newer homes, and that also allows you to, if you start in the 90s, you also have skipped asbestos and lead-based paint, and asbestos being something that really phased out by early 1980s, not so common. And lead-based paint, you really shouldn't have it after early 1980s, although you're only required to test in 1979 contractually. Yep. So there's a whole bunch of things to talk about environmentally with what those impacts are. We're going to skip it. But if you're a home buyer and you haven't considered environmental impacts, lead-based paint, mold, radon, and asbestos, those are like the four horsemen of an environmental issue with your home. You may want to look into those things, and if you're our client, I'm happy to talk to you about how to think about those things and their severity.
And a quick note on asbestos too. My home's, I believe it's a 77, and it had popcorn asbestos ceilings, which I didn't think anything of. Fine, I'm not going to be messing with the ceiling anyway. Well, we went to insulate the attic because also 70s homes have lesser insulation, and a friend of mine fell through the ceiling, and now asbestos is in the air, and it created that chain event of we're going to have to mitigate for asbestos. So when you're looking at homes and you're thinking asbestos might be fine, it very well could be. I just got hit with that unexpected event and had to to make do with it. So, yeah.
I lived in a home with asbestos and with popcorn ceilings. I wasn't 100% sure it had asbestos, but we suspected, and it meant that we couldn't drill a hole in the ceiling for anything. And in fact, I always wondered, well, these light fixtures look new. I wondered, did they install them without disturbing the asbestos? And early in my career, I had a client who came to us after firing their buyer's agent because their buyer's agent never mentioned asbestos. And they put a property under contract, and they paid for inspections, and they decided, their agent's like, don't worry. They thought about getting the asbestos testing, and their agent's like, I never heard of asbestos testing. There's nothing worth testing. This is a while ago, Hamish.
I was going to say, this is a long time ago. Yep.
The home had been remodeled. And it turns out that the way the seller had remodeled it, they scraped all the popcorn off the ceiling right into the floor without covering the floors, without doing any mitigation to do it properly wet. And they ended up with asbestos fibers embedded in all the carpeting of the home. It was everywhere. So it was the air test that the agent was discouraging them from doing. And they said, well, let's do it. And it turned out the house was full of asbestos, and they never would have guessed it.
But that house was a scrape, yeah.
Well, I don't know how they mitigated it. Yeah. What happened to that deal? They broke up with their agent. They broke up with that deal, and they hired us. And
but the fees for the seller for not mitigating it correctly and everything too. Oz, you should have seen the house when we were mitigating. Every single thing possible was plasticed off, and then we had the house on a negative air system. It was insane.
That's how you do it. Red tape. Plastic everywhere, air ducts are closed off, and you've got pressure going in so that stuff isn't going out. It's an air
other
scrubbers
way.
Or pressure other way. Air scrubbers.
It's weird.
It's very. There's a system to mitigate properly, and it's not complicated, but it also scares people for a good reason. It causes mesothelioma. If you're exposed to enough asbestos over a period of time, it's in your lungs. That's 25 or 30 years later, you've got this horrible form of cancer.
Yep. All right. If we could just chat, man. Commute time?
Okay, commute time. Commute time is, according to some experts, the number one factor for happiness in real estate transactions. So before you schedule a showing even, you should be, this is why it's stage one, you should be Google mapping or Apple mapping the distance from where you think you're going to be working or you're currently working and that home or in that neighborhood. And the ideal scenario in my mind is 15 minutes or less. I currently am 20 minutes to downtown Boulder, and I can tell you it adds up over the course of a week. And I love where I live. It was a known trade-off, but it's still a factor for our lifestyle. And
I think keyword right, known trade-off. Like if you get it by surprise, you're going to be a lot less happy than if you go in eyes wide open.
Exactly, and you may want to prioritize this one a little more. And I have had clients, and I've helped them build spreadsheets where we put individual weights on criteria. And if we're going to do something like that and be super analytical in how you evaluate neighborhoods and homes, I would encourage you to put more weight on commute time, because commute times are just going up in Boulder. It's densifying, and we're not doing anything to alleviate traffic density in Boulder, period. We're not.
Yep.
And there's some people that conspiratorially believe the city is intentionally trying to make commuting so miserable that you get on a bicycle and stop driving around. I like that conspiracy that goes around. They just say, look at how the lights are timed. Guess what?
Boulder's deep state.
They're not timed, and they're not timed because we don't want to make it easier for you to get around.
Okay.
I know.
I'll say I've been rudely... I don't know. I expect a North Boulder to South Boulder trip to take 10 minutes, and it's always, on the higher end of 15, 20.
Easy. Yeah. So, all right, let's keep moving on. Stage 1 due diligence. Hamish, I'm totally wrong about that 20 minutes. We are already at...
Oh, yeah, I know.
Forget that 20 minutes. Forget it. It's not going to happen.
We're at 30 now.
I don't have a timer, by the way, on the app. I used to. It doesn't tell me what time we're at, so I have no idea. Okay. So
Sorry,
let's continue with stage 1, pre-offer due diligence, maintenance requirements, i.e. versus your free time. And some homes require a lot more TLC, including historic homes. Some homes require very little because it's built with materials that you can easily use a power washer on. It has landscaping that is basically a gravel lot and xeriscaped. You don't need to worry about mowing. It's super easy, and people often overlook this. One of the classics is the corner lot, and they always talk about the pros of the corner lot. But here in the city of Boulder, guess who's responsible for shoveling that corner lot? The sidewalk all the way around is yours, and you have to get it done within 24 hours of the snowstorm ending. Otherwise, you could get a big hefty ticket, and God forbid the city send a crew to remove ice that has been formed by people walking on the sidewalk. Because if that happens to you, you're going to get a really hefty bill. So just be aware, corner lots are the...
And then you're in Boulder, so of course there's going to be the person compacting the snow at like 2 a.m.
Right,
doing a run or something.
Yeah. I mean, that's why when I lived in town, I was shoveling before dawn. As early, before there was any light.
Get ahead of it.
Get ahead of it, because if you don't, all the neighborhood kids and people walking around are going to pack that stuff down, and then it's not a fun process. Okay. So maintenance, that's maintenance requirements. Another item for stage 1 due diligence is to do some research on who the seller might be. And there's all sorts of things to consider with regard to what their profession is. Some of my favorite sellers have been engineers. And the engineers have, across the board, all of my engineer clients have been maintenance obsessed. And their properties are generally in good condition. And there are some people that have not cared for their properties at all, including some of the other scientists, by the way. You science listeners, you are not very good property maintainers. I love you, but when I get...
Not all scientists.
Not all scientists. Engineers, though, I've found to be very on top of maintenance. So trust your intuition. Your eyes are very useful when you're touring a home to get a sense of whether it's been well maintained or not. But there's other things that your research on who the seller is can turn up. And here in the state of Colorado, sellers are not required to disclose bad things having occurred in the house. So these are what are considered psychological stigmas. Other states do require this disclosure. Colorado is not one of them. And the seller nor their agent has to disclose that there was a murder. The Ramsey house, for example, you'd have to be nuts to miss it, because you have to sign a non-disclaimer to even see the house, or a non-disclaimer, and you have to sign an agreement that you will not take photographs, you will not use this as some publicity stunt. That one is very hard to ignore, but there are lots of other bad things that have happened in homes, and we have seen them sell later with no disclosure whatsoever of the murder, mayhem, and bad things that happened in the house. And maybe that doesn't matter to you, or maybe it really does, and talking to the neighbors and doing your research on who the seller is can turn up some of those news articles, or can turn up the neighbors telling you, oh, by the way, there was...
And that may be a bigger story or a topic another time.
Oh, maybe. I mean, it's a huge topic. It's a very sensitive...
Halloween? Could talk
maybe,
about ghosts.
But it's also... It may be at Halloween, but I mean, the most recent one, there was a suicide. of a child in the home. Like the child was like 13 years old and had a mental health issue. And we found out after right around the time we wrote the offer, and we actually got beaten. My clients thought about it and decided it was okay. And I don't know their spiritual and personal beliefs, but they found out about it from the neighbor. And I'm not sure the people who actually got the house, they beat us in a bidding war, knew about that factor of the tragic death that occurred in the home. I would want to know what, maybe that explains the bump in the night. And maybe we talk about it at Halloween, Hamish, but it's so tragic and so sad that
Yeah, that one I'm not so sure about. But
it may not be a Casper the Ghost that's haunting you, right?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something a little darker. Anyhow, orientation.
Boy, there's a lot of items in stage 1, aren't there?
I know, we're
and it's not even
well.
It's not even complete, by the way. Like I look at this list, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, and we are still just brushing the surface on due diligence. So here's another one, orientation of the home. And as you might know, south-facing homes typically have better light inside the house. But what you may not know is that the driveways also melt and the sidewalks also melt here in the Colorado sunshine much faster.
That is such a benefit.
And you may not know that south-facing homes often have better roof orientations for solar, not just active PV, photovoltaic solar, but also passive solar design can be maximized with a south-facing house. And it is such an amazing difference when a home has been designed to face the southern horizon year round. It is night and day different. And you might say, well,
that's you, isn't it?
It is. This house was very intelligently designed. You could also say something like, well, wait a minute, it could overheat in the summer. Not if the overhangs were properly designed. Because it's not just where the sun is, it's the height of the sun. The sun is lower in the sky in the winter and higher in the sky in the summer. So long overhangs can be the right length overhangs. The arches over windows, the roof, the extension of the roof from the walls outward can really affect if it overheats in the summer or not.
And I'll put a link down. We use it on shoots. It's called SunCalc, and you can kind of pick the day and time of the year and put a location, and it'll tell you how the sun kind of orbits around your location. I'll say too, I'm east-west facing, and I get a lot of really intense morning sun and evening sun. The backyard's in the evening, and I don't have any shade or protection. So during the summer, it's really hot, and it's kind of difficult to socialize out there. That said, in the mornings, it's so good. You can see across the street, the neighbors who have the shadow in the morning, they have snow for much longer, and it ices and everything, and my snow shovels itself.
Right.
So
it's a critical factor for how the house lives, as you might say, is orientation. And one thing you mentioned, Hamish, was solar or shadows. In the city of Boulder, we also have rules around how much shadow your house can cast on the neighbors. And homes that are north-south oriented cast smaller shadows than east-west oriented homes, which means you get a much bigger build-out potential of your home in the regulatory environment we live in that limits home sizes based on lot sizes and a whole bunch of other factors, including solar shadows. So if you didn't know that before, now you do.
The more you know.
The more you know. So we've touched on every item, and we're gonna hit on Meet the Neighbors one more time, because there's many reasons to meet the neighbors, okay? But one of them we talked about, learn about the house and the neighborhood, but because the neighbors will totally tell you if something happened in the house. Like we had a deal in Martin Acres where the neighbors said, we asked, what do you know about the house? And the guy's like, well, it got a lot of flood damage. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? This is from 2013. Because there was nothing in the seller's property disclosure about flood damage. We were already under contract. So this should have been phase 1 due diligence. We were doing it in phase 2. And it turned out the seller didn't think that the 2013 floods were a flood. They envisioned something different, not a river, and they had diverted the river from entering when it had already done a bunch of damage on the first floor with sandbags. And it was the neighbor who told us about the flood damage. So that's a really important thing. They could tell you about the house and what the history of the home has been. And they can also influence the offer. So there's a good chance if it's a friendly neighborhood where the neighbors have known each other for years, and you make a really good impression on the neighbor, they will be calling the seller to say, please take Hamish's offer.
Yeah.
He is so cool.
That's very real.
Like, I just want to throw this in there that, I would like a neighbor like Hamish because he's helpful, he's friendly, he's like a good person.
We got along when we first met. Yeah.
We have kids the same age. We totally got along. Whatever it happens to be, go meet the neighbors and get that offer influence, because odds are if it's a really desirable house and it's priced right, there's probably somebody else thinking about writing an offer or submitting an offer at the same time, and influencing the neighbors can help push the offer in the right direction. And that is one of my secrets, Hamish. I probably shouldn't have shared it. Is the importance.
I can still cut it.
No, let's keep it in there. I
think it's a bonus for if you listened 50 minutes in.
If you've gotten this far. And that's Hamish's kind way of telling me, keep going, buddy. We got to get this done. So that is stage 1. We're going to cover stage 2 more superficially and stage 3 more superficially, because we don't want this to be a 3-hour podcast. So stage 2, due diligence. You're already under contract, but this is non-physical. And this involves things like association docs, off-record and on-record title matters, surveys, and the due diligence documents that you have requested from the seller. And in Colorado, there are specific deadlines for each of those, and also specific places where you can request due diligence documents. And you should be having a conversation with your agent about what documents you should be requesting, what really matters, and maybe what doesn't, before you write up your offer, and then thinking about how to evaluate what you get from the seller. Don't be surprised if you don't get a lot, because a lot of listing agents don't prep their seller to deliver due diligence documents. But that has been a deadline in the contract for like a decade now, so it shouldn't be a surprise that you're asking for them. But in the event that you've got a bidding war, how you ask for them could impact whether your offer is considered or not. Because if they think you're going to be too difficult as a buyer, they may not take your offer because you wrote, a giant wall of text into the due diligence document.
Or
request.
if it looks too legal, too legalese, you can scare people that way as well.
That's right.
It's a weird dance. Yep.
That's absolutely right. It's a dance, and it's a conversation with your agent, and ultimately you should be making the call on what you request for due diligence docs. And the associated deadlines in the contract dictate when you should be reviewing these things in earnest and being careful to make sure you've checked the box and feel satisfied. As I often tell my clients, due diligence is a bottomless pit. We go as deep as you need to go, and you're the only one that can say that we've gone deep enough or not. And if the deadline has elapsed, it's time's over for that item. So you have very important deadlines to keep track of, and we will help you keep track of those to avoid blowing a deadline and realizing, oh no, I haven't reviewed the association docs, and your deadline was 2 days ago. It's too late to review the association. I mean, it doesn't matter anymore. You can review them. You should
see
know
what you're getting into.
You should know the rules, but we have no objection left for you because we blew the deadline. So there's lots of ways to manage dates and deadlines, but that's not for purposes of this podcast. All right, let's move on to stage 3 due diligence. And this is
nicely done.
This is the one everyone else talks about, okay? This is the one that we don't need to spend a ton of time talking about because there's a gazillion blog articles,
likely we've covered
videos.
It a little bit too.
We touched on it a little bit, but we're going to give you the basics, okay? You want to get a primary home inspection by a qualified inspection company that has reasonable credentials. And there are a lot of bad inspectors. And there are a lot of so-so inspectors. And there are very, very few fantastic inspectors. Because if they are fantastic and so thorough that they scare the buyer out of every potential house, they will never get a recommendation and they will not be in business. And they could have done something else with their time other than be a home inspector too, if they are that careful with due diligence. Frankly, I am rarely surprised by anything that comes up on primary inspection because most of what they do is visible and obvious. And in our showing, we've picked up on the biggest items already when we tour the house and we tell you about them. So choose a good agent and they're going to tell you what the primary inspector is saying to begin with. None of the primary inspections should be shocking. Well, maybe the inspector will find something, but it's rare.
And they do well. They'll test your outlets, they'll test your water temperature. They do kind of some more in depth than we can see from visible and obvious, but for the most part, I can't
tell you about radon because I'm not doing a radon test. I can't tell you there's a break in the sewer line, Those are the things they should be covering very carefully. But I can tell you if that roof looks kind of old because you can see the roof, usually. I can tell you if there's negative slope because we've walked around the foundation and it's really obvious, usually. But sometimes they surprise us and they find things.
So you see a negative slope. Is that when you jump into the secondary inspection?
Maybe. So secondary inspections are things where the primary inspector doesn't want to say something too bad, and they say, I'm not a fireplace expert. I'm not an HVAC expert. I'm not a plumbing expert. And it looks like you have a break in the line. You should consult with a plumber who can come out. You should consult with a roofer who can come out. Those are the secondary inspections. And if there are signs of negative slope and signs of movement in the foundation, we strongly recommend an evaluation of the foundation by companies that are in the business of repairing foundations. We have seen situations where structural engineers miss things and the repair companies find things. And if the inspection is free, you probably don't want to get it because it's designed to convince you to do work that you probably don't need
to be a quote
to cover the cost of the free inspection. So you get what you pay for in life. I would be very careful if you are being offered free inspections by any service provider at all, because my experience has shown that you're better off paying for an inspection than you are getting a freebie by a service provider. And then the last item is contractor estimates, which in my mind, we covered some of them, like the HVAC could be a contractor estimate, but you may also want to get an architect or a builder if you're planning to expand the home. In your mind, you're going to spend $100,000 and add a second story to a basic ranch. No, it's more like $400,000 in the city of Boulder, and I could tell you that.
Here to tell you,
if you told me that's your plan, you want to buy an $800,000 Martin Acres ranch and do a $100,000 second story, I'm going to tell you it's never going to happen, and you need to double, triple, quadruple that number more realistically. 400,000 is actually going to be challenging in this market to get that second story unless you happen to be the GC. And even a GC is not going to get it done for 100.
And then it goes back to your asbestos and all sorts there too.
Oh, the cost.
As far as inspections go, yeah.
Oh yeah, and asbestos may be an important one if you're planning to add a second story. So that's all part of talking to your agent about what's important to you, so that we know. Like if you told me you absolutely are going to add a second story, you may want to do more environmental tests because it could add significant cost for you. We recently had somebody reach out to us that are thinking about selling their home because they can't do the remodeling within their budget because their home has a lot of asbestos, and to do it right is going to require additional costs that they didn't plan for. And just the age of the home should be a warning, right? If it was built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there's a really good chance there's a lot of asbestos, and yes, your cost to remodel will be a lot higher.
Yeah, expect it.
All right, that's stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, due diligence. And that is our core topic for the House Einstein podcast. And now we're going to move on to other items.
Perfect. As a little tease, perhaps, we didn't discuss anything about how you would, say, object to these or the possible resolutions for these or what you can expect in the Boulder market. So perhaps stay tuned for another pod.
Right.
Perhaps.
That's a very valid point, Hamish, that there's a time to find out about these things, and then there's a time to issue a potential objection, and then there's a whole strategy to manage what is the best possible outcome for the objection and resolution process, something that has to work for all parties, because if it doesn't, it's not a deal, and you could have found yourself. So here's the last piece I will say, and then we're going to move on. Due diligence is not free. You expect to spend $1,000 or more, and for larger, more luxurious, $1,000 is probably the minimum, and that may not cover even some of the more detailed things on inspection, and certainly doesn't cover the value of time. So we want our clients to be as thorough as possible, and we encourage them, including having a due diligence checklist. And maybe we will reference this podcast, Hamish. Going forward, please listen to the podcast, because we have an hour where all we're talking about is due diligence. And
mindset around it, too.
And the right mindset, and how you can avoid putting a house under contract that you should never have written an offer on. Stage 1 due diligence is all about sifting out the wheat from the chaff, not writing offers on homes that are a waste of your time. Because you are going to discover one of these things as you go through due diligence. You are like, why pay for an inspection on a home that's in the wrong school district or is the wrong property type? Like, you've wasted $1,000. And so that's why it's stage 1. Before you write the offer is stage 1. All right, that is our due diligence section. Are we ready to move on? Do we need maybe a little break?
Final thing I want to say is hello, future clients that are listening to this podcast now.
Okay, well, let's talk about market conditions. And we're going to talk very specifically about real estate in Denver for attached dwellings, which are condominiums and townhomes, not single-family detached houses. And our data source is coming from Colorado, which is also fed through CoreLogic and is pulling information from the MLS itself, Colorado. But I think it also pulls some information from Zillow, because InfoSparks, the service that's part of Colorado, is owned by Zillow. So we believe this data to be accurate. And if you're going to play in the Denver market, you really need the Denver MLS. Although there is data sharing agreements, it's not as good as having direct access. This is one of several MLS systems that I subscribe to make sure we're giving good service to our clients. All right, so I'm just looking at Denver County and just condos and townhomes, and we are making sure we are looking at not the average, the rolling average, which is one of the pull downs. We're looking at actually the monthly data. And we're going to start by looking at the median sale price in January. And the median sale price in January for Denver County, hold on, let me back up. The reason I'm choosing Denver County is because Denver agents have a propensity, some Denver agents, to mischaracterize their properties that they've listed as being in Denver when they actually are not. And a few years ago, somebody pointed this out to me, that there really is no difference between the city of Denver and Denver County. And I actually did a whole bunch of work to analyze that, and it turned out they were right. But the MLS was showing a pretty significant difference between Denver County and the city of Denver. And what I concluded was agents are lying about the city, but they're putting in the correct county code. So there's fewer erroneous data points when you choose Denver County for your analysis. So here we go. The median sale price for attached condos and townhomes in January was $412,000. And that's an increase year over year of a shocking 17.7%. New listings in Denver County. There were 501 new listings that hit the market last month, and that's an increase of 32.2% year over year. And it's important, I will also mention, that you look at year over year, because if you try to compare January to the previous month of December, it's a
cyclical market. Yeah.
Real estate is seasonal and cyclical. If you wanted to look at the difference between January and December, you should look at that difference over many year periods to see how different it is year over year. But you don't compare January to December in just one year. It's a useless data point. But you can compare January to January. So January 2025 to 2024. All right, active listings. There were 1,048 active listings last month. That's an increase of an astounding 74.7%. That is a massive increase in condos and townhomes. And one of the things I've been telling my investors, as well as my lovely bride, that maybe it's time to pick up a Denver townhome, because the prices are going to be under significant downward pressure when you see that much of an increase in active listings. So these are...
Yeah, good point.
This is the total supply, active, available to purchase. So new listings are up 32%. Active total listings, 74.7% increase year over year. Pending sales have only increased 3.6% year over year. So there were 231 properties in pending status last month, an increase of 3.6%. What about closings? Okay, closings actually spiked too. So we saw a spike of to 198 closings last month, and that's an increase year over year of 51%. So sales have also increased. The market is waking up compared to a year ago, but not as much as new listings, and the total inventory pileup has increased. So yes,
I was going to say, could we work it out where it's proportional? Would that be, divide active by sales? Yes. Or
that's called absorption. And I used to track this, Hamish, very carefully. And what I would do is I would look at the most recent month's sales, like that would be January, by the total inventory of the previous month. Because real estate deals take 30 to 45 days to close. So the supply on market in December is more indicative as a percentage of what is under contract in January. So I used to put together absorption charts for all of our clients for every market. Fort Collins, Denver.
That's on request only.
Louisville, Lafayette. We don't do that anymore because if you are a client and we want to go down the rabbit hole, we do that on a neighborhood level or a property type and price range analysis, but not for a whole city and just dump that data into the world because it isn't relevant or actionable. But yes, absorption is an important one to look at. And so classic example, we were advising a seller yesterday, and we were trying to look at comps, and there literally were 6 sales in the last 12 months that were relevant and that we thought were relevant. And of the 6, we drilled down to realizing really there's only 3 in the last 12 months that we can use to accurately price your home. And there's a lot of guessing going on, and we need to look at the competition at the price range we think we're going to list, because if the competition is better and we're listing higher, all you're doing is selling the other house. So yes, we're going into data, but keep in mind that this data is more armchair and usefulness is limited to the armchair people. And if you really are thinking about buying or selling property, you absolutely should be calling an agent that has their hands in the data, can show you what they're looking at, and advise you in the war room, as we call it, before you write an offer or before you list your house.
Is this a dinner table data? Thanksgiving, you want to have some conversation, but not necessarily get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is very useful and fun to talk about. Oh my God, there's 51% more sales last month than a year ago. But guess what? There's actually almost 75% more active listings, and there's almost 32% more new listings hitting the market. So yes, sales spiked, but inventory spiked even more. So don't get too excited. But your typical agent will focus on whatever data point they want you to hear. Yeah. If they want you to move faster.
Gets you to shop.
Price per square. This is where the rubber meets the road. And we look at median. I think median is much more relevant. It gets rid of some of the outliers to a greater extent. So median price per square in the county of Denver last month was $335. And that is a decrease of 9% year over year. That's a pretty substantial decrease. Now, let me talk about how much it's fallen. In May of 2022, the median sale price for this type of property in Denver was $457. So 335 over 457. Oh, I wasn't going to ask you to do the math, Hamish, but I'm going to do it really fast.
I'm writing down, yeah.
Okay, 335 over, what was the other number? 457?
I believe so.
Make sure. Okay, but then the window disappeared. Divided by 457 minus 1. So that's a decrease from the peak of 26.7%. So for those of you that are sitting around going, oh yeah, real estate's so expensive, it's got so much to fall, it's already fallen almost 27% in the city of Boulder for attached dwellings, townhomes, and condos out Boulder, Denver County, technically. Okay. All right.
I see people saying it needs to go to 2008 prices. I'm like, oh yeah.
I think people years ago now? Should realize that the dollars from 2008 have inflated their purchasing power away. And I don't know what that number is, and you can probably do it while we're walking, but go look up an inflation calculator and see how much your purchasing power has decreased since 2008. And you're probably going to realize that this property is like 50% less expensive because of the decrease in purchasing power. So I think it's important to look at these things from a big picture, and it's quite possible we reach the bottom this year. It depends on where rates are going, because this type of property, attached dwellings, mid-range prices are going to be strongly affected by, your purchasing power.
You're 100% right too. 50% January 2008 to January 2025 is $1 is $1.50.
There you go. I just guessed it. Where's that coming from, Hamish?
CPI inflation calculator, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay, thank you. All right. Sometimes every dog has his day, and that was me getting lucky with throwing out random number. Okay. So that's our little segment on market conditions. And as always, if you're thinking about buying or selling real estate and you're serious about knowing what's really going on, make sure the real estate agent you're talking to has a firm grasp on the data and can show you the data relevant to your specific situation. Forget about city or county level data. You need it down to the neighborhood, down to the property type, down to the price range, and the updates and age of the home. All of that affect valuation, and there's a micro market for every type of property, and it's really sad when people don't understand that. And they go in blind and they choose an agent because they're good looking, or they choose an agent because, which of course all my clients
can't
choose.
Blame them.
Well, true, right? I mean, if you're going to spend all this time stuck in a car with somebody, they better look good and smell nice, I guess. Luckily we do all three: look good, smell nice, and have access to the data. All right. Let's move on, Hamish.
I gotta bite my tongue sometimes. So sales, Osman.
Okay, so shameless self-promotion is our next segment. And Hamish, we have an amazing new listing. I can't tell you how excited I am to put this on the market. I think we will be doing our primary videography and photography in March and have it on early April. It's not entirely clear, but this property, if you need a generous sized ranch that is newer construction and is built to feature stunning views, I mean truly jaw-dropping views, and is still only about 15 minutes from town, we might have something for you. I can't give you much more in terms of specifics. It is a property that it will likely be below 3. So it's not going to be in competition with where the market is weak. And it is a property that is one that you kind of buy and realize you have an asset that could pass to generations. It is so rare and so gorgeous that when I talk about it with Leah, my beloved, that's my indicator, right? Like, this is a good one. And I got to tell you, this is a good one. I had to think carefully whether we should buy it and move down from the mountains. And it checks almost all the boxes for my unique needs, missing a couple of weird ones because, I've got my quirks that most buyers don't have. This is a good one, and I hope it goes to a buyer that deserves it, to be honest, because the seller has been such a great client and takes care of homes and is so transparent. It's just a lovely group of sellers. The husband and wife are lovely, and I think
you hear this too. Why, if it's such a special property, well, why are they selling it? They leveled up. And we don't want to say too much about that. They're not, that's not to indicate that they're going to be super motivated, but they're not selling it because there's something wrong with it. When you stop to build your dream home, that creates an opportunity for someone else to own a fantastic asset. So that's what's happening here. All right. So call us, I guess I should add in. So I can't give you the address. I can't tell you much more, but I can tease you that this is coming soon. But if you happen to be our client, I could tell you more. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Or a prospective client even, right? We could talk to you about it, but I can't do it on this podcast. Ready for the next segment? Phone number is looking more and more attractive.
Well,
anyway,
yeah. I mean, you find us at houseeinstein.com. My phone number is all over the place on that website, but that's the best way to reach us, houseeinstein.com. And happy to tell you about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Time for our almost to the end, Hamish. We are on a segment.
Do you recall why we picked all these homes? Because it's now a week old.
Did you take notes?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I know. I've got the first one down.
I mean, I'm sure. Look, I can pull them up and I can tell you why I picked them. I just haven't looked at them in 2 weeks. So
I know.
Let's see. So these are a little older. They're not last week's. They're from the previous week. So next week we'll be skipping. Let's pull up sales of the week 7. Okay, there are our 4 properties. And the price points actually are a little bit toward the mid and lower end of what we normally talk about. This first property is 3889 15th Street. And it sold for $1.575 and closed on February 5th. Just under 3,000 total square feet. It's a classic 2-story with 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, and it was built in the mid-'80s. It's also very close to the Little Lucky's Empire. And that Little Lucky's Empire, with Periwinkle and Oakleaf Circle and 15th Street kind of curves around, feels very secluded as a location.
Is it unincorporated, or is it just near the unincorporated area? Do you know?
I don't know if it's unincorporated. It could be a pocket of unincorporated Boulder County. So when you look at the city of Boulder, and you will find a whole bunch of unincorporated Boulder County that is a patchwork mosaic within the city. I don't think that's this. I'm pretty sure this is a subdivision that's annexed into the city, Hamish. The legal description is Lot 2, Orchard End. You can find this out very quickly by looking it up at the tax assessor. Maybe you want to do that while I'm talking about the property, because when you do it, the tax assessor tells you right away if it's unincorporated Boulder County.
All right, you keep going.
All right, I'm going to keep going. So let's talk about the deal. And the property was originally listed I feel sorry for these sellers, but they originally listed it in November of 2023 for $1.925. And November is a horrible time to list a home. I have warned my clients, and I've said it repeatedly, that if you don't need to sell it in the fourth quarter, you are better off waiting to the beginning of the following year. Put it on the market even in January or February, because time and the upswing of the market is now on your side, versus fourth quarter is bargain season. And a lot of buyers are out of the market between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and 100% that's what we see here. It was withdrawn after a few weeks, and they never brought it back. It just fully expired in May of 2024. They relisted it. It's unclear if they fired their first agent or not, but there was 2 months that went by before they relisted it in July last year at 1.77. And they brought it as coming soon, and then it was activated a couple of days later. Nothing happened for 2 full months, and finally they dropped the price to 1.69. And that was in September. I'm sorry, they dropped it to 1.7. There was a little glitch there. They dropped it first to 1.690, and then no, they dropped it to 1.699, which is unusual. That just maybe some communication error between the agent and their clients. So really, it dropped to 1.7. Nothing happened for another 2 months, and in October it was withdrawn, as a lot of listings were withdrawn. And then, boom, it went from withdrawn to sold February 5th. So this is an example of somebody sifting through last year's withdrawn and expired listings, finding a listing that actually checked all the boxes but wasn't actively on the market, and they approached the seller through their agent because the property was still listed, and it sold. It sold for cash at 1.575, so a number that was probably pretty disappointing given that the last list price was 1.7, so that's a $124,000 difference. 1.699 minus 1.575, and another $5,000 additional concession. Those are usually for inspection related items. I mean, overall, it's an 80s house. It has a pool, which is somewhat unusual. The kitchen looks like it had been updated a little bit, but it's architecturally interesting. I remember looking at it because I remember when I look at these photos, I see the there's like a statue of somebody in like a knight.
It's like a knight,
armor, yeah. And those types of goofy things, hard to get out of your brain once you've seen it. But overall, a pretty decent deal. It's a family-friendly, functional house. I'm not crazy about split layouts with 2 bedrooms on the main and 2 on the lower level. But I don't remember at this point how that layout played. I just remember it being kind of funky. And
it was fun.
Oh, you know more
Yeah.
about it, Hamish. Let's say more.
Yeah. We went and saw this with some clients. I think it was either last year or the year before, and they were looking at moving into Boulder, and I think this is one of their adjust expectations on what your money gets you in Boulder houses. Really, the biggest thing, and it's actually showing a little bit in the photos, is the floor was a little bit tired, and then not as obvious in the photos, but the siding was also getting a little bit tired too. And that was kind of their, dang, that's what this money buys in Boulder, and it's not nearly as put away as we were hoping it would be. Yeah.
This is a thing that happens to buyers who are not used to our real estate market, and that sometimes listing agents' photos and videos oversell the property, and when they actually come back to see it, it is disappointing. And so we sometimes have to have this conversation with our clients and with ourselves to make sure we don't overdo it, because we don't want the journey of a buyer to be super excited because they saw our video and our photos, and then they walk in and they have a huge sense of disappointment because it doesn't meet expectations. The wide lenses we used were too wide, and now we made a tiny kitchen look huge.
Too bright. Too colorful.
I don't know if you could be too bright, but you have to be careful with having a reasonably accurate representation while still selling it. There's a balance there, and this house disappointed our clients when they went to see it because it looked way better in the photos than it showed in person. So there you go, 1.575, pretty hefty discount.
Cool layout.
Yeah. But something we're doing with our clients, yes, cool layout, with our clients, and that is go through withdrawn and expired listings. Schedule a meeting with me, clients. If I haven't talked to you about this and I haven't mentioned it, I am more than happy to spend an hour and quickly pull up whatever expired listings we think actually could have been a good fit last year. And in some cases, there may still be a listing agreement. In other cases, maybe not. We still would advise contacting the listing agent because they have the relationship and we've used their marketing to find the property. But I mean, there's a liability factor that you may face if we skip the listing agent in owing somebody a commission you didn't expect to owe. But that may not be your liability. It's just something to keep in mind. If the agent is legally still in a holdover period or something like that. Some people will pretend they didn't read the contract or understand it. Our job is just to advise you of this potential risk. But you should still look at expired and withdrawn listings. Okay, let's move on.
Cool. New build.
Our second property is 459 Muirfield Circle. I'm having a hard time with saying these words. Muirfield Circle, Louisville. And Hamish, this is a firehouse, right? So this was a home that we believe likely burned during the Marshall Fire, which was a couple of years ago. And I'm looking at it. I'm not 100% sure it did, Hamish, but it could have. It could have been one of those.
I'm wondering. I know when we were searching, we found one we thought was, but it wasn't. But it was. Yeah, this one may or may not be. It's right in the neighborhood that I think did burn a little bit.
It is. It is because if you look at the sale history, there's sales like 2007, and the name of the LLC that's doing the rebuild is Remington Rebuild. So that 100% is the kind of giveaways that this home was completely destroyed and then reconstructed on the lot. So it's a 6,700 square foot lot with a 4,000 square foot brand new house, 3-car garage, 5 bedrooms, 5 baths. And if you look at the functional aspects of that, 4 bedrooms on the upper, 1 in the lower level or basement, 5 bathrooms, 4 of them are full baths, a 3-car garage, a price point hovering in the low 1.5s. I mean, that just checks all the boxes for what most buyers would find acceptable. I mean, we do have some people who would say this is too much house, but this is
smaller
like
yard,
classic family-friendly house in Louisville, which is Familyville. People love Louisville. They don't have some of the social issues and the crime issues that Boulder has, and has a beautiful historic downtown. It just checks one box after another. Remington is also a well-known company that has been around for a long time, and I look at the listing agents, and they are the agents for Remington. So they're a well-established builder with a track record. The downside of builder homes, by the way, are you have to use the builder contract, but that's not for purposes of this podcast. Just remember I noted that.
I'm going to note that actually for a future topic. That'd be cool.
Yeah, builder contracts. They wanted that. They almost certainly got it. And you could have had this house because it was listed in... it was listed in March of 2024 at 1.635. By July, they cut it. Oh, no, they raised it slightly, probably because of the finishes and things that they had chosen to put in. But they hadn't gone under contract. They pulled it off in November. I mean, the builder's pulling it off from November to New Year's, right? Like, if that isn't a tip that don't list your home at this time of year.
Yeah.
Oh, but hold on, Hamish. They actually, no, they did. They withdrew it and relisted it. So I take that back. They withdrew it and relisted it. They decided to go ahead and put it back at 1.636. They cut it a few days later to 1.588, and they put it under contract within 2 months of that relist at 1.545. So, here you are getting a negotiated discount from a builder. Builders sometimes don't negotiate. These ones did, and they got it sold, and I think they got a fantastic house.
Yep.
Let me just take a quick gander at the photos, Hamish, and you should...
I got one note. Yeah.
You should
about
too.
The photos.
I mean, it's one of these houses where, first, the landscaping is probably not included, and you can see that in the photos, but it could have been staged throughout. Instead, it's just staged a little bit in places, like the primary. There's nothing objectionable in any...
I have one.
It's all okay. I have
an objection.
Okay, what's your objection?
One of the bathrooms doesn't have any mirrors.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like a Jack and Jill bath, but then there's only lights. There's no mirrors on it. I think it's let's see, fifth photo from the bottom.
I mean, maybe they weren't going to...
Or laundry room? Yeah.
I just find
and it's missing some hardware, but that's builder stuff.
That's builder stuff. So there's a process with builders with punch lists, and we do guide our clients through that process because it's important to pay a lot of attention to that punch list process. But my clients that had bought from Remington didn't complain about it. They said it was pretty good, the whole experience. So, and it's the same agents involved on the sell side. I wouldn't hesitate with this build. And this is, by the way, something you get with working with an agent that's been around and have dealt with the same people over and over again. Like, it wasn't a bad experience for my clients that bought new build from these guys. They were happy, and they were not none of my clients are pushovers, okay? And if they act like pushovers, I've got their back to encourage them to not be pushovers, because you need an advocate in this business. Okay, so what I don't like is the fake staging in the virtual staging. I just find it just isn't really representative. Like, I guess it's okay. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe it gives you an idea, but I doubt that pool table ball size is actually accurate for the space.
The selling point. Yeah.
It just gives you an idea of what might go into that space, but I've seen so many basements with pool tables that you can't actually play pool on because you can't get the cues in the right places. So anyway, great little house, or great house in general. I certainly wouldn't hesitate to live there. But the last piece I do want to mention with fire homes is that a home burned there, and all sorts of chemicals were released much into the ground. I don't know how extensive that cleanup effort is. I've been told it is extremely extensive, but I don't know that for a fact. If you were my client
verify
buying this, I would say, especially if you have kids who are going to be running around barefoot in the grass, I'm going to say, I just want you to do your due diligence, and you may want to look into whether there are environmental concerns with homes that have been burned and rebuilt. I'm sure it's a brand new foundation. They don't usually even reuse foundations. But what's in the dirt? Is all the dirt new too? Is there any risk of something in 10 or 20 years of finding out there's a nasty carcinogen, and your kids were running around barefoot during their childhood all over the lawn, and now they have some rare form of cancer? I just want to be able to sleep at night that I warned you that there might be something there that you don't know. And I own a home that burned
eyes wide open
and was completely rebuilt and has a brand new foundation. I wasn't afraid of doing that, but we also don't have children running around barefoot in the lawn.
Yeah.
Okay. Next property.
Denver. Nope, Boulder. My bad. Just looks Denver.
Do we have a Denver? I think we have. No, we have a Rollinsville. Okay, so 1518 Chambers Drive in Mountain Shadows. This is a large attached dwelling townhome style property built in the 60s from a architectural style I would call Soviet. I don't know what else to call it. Like, it's sort of architecturally uninspiring, and I've never been able to sell one of these despite showing them 100 plus times because the aesthetic is so unattractive. But they are a property that fits the budget and fits functional needs and are well located close to schools. So if you need an investment property, or you need a property for a short period of time and you're like, I need the function, I don't care about what it looks like. We are in Familyville, and it's only $675 to be in Table Mesa and be in Mesa Elementary, Southern Hills, and Fairview schools. And I'm going to be busy with work, and you're busy with work, and mostly we're living inside the house. We've got little kids. We don't care if it's ugly. This totally makes sense, and I'm pretty sure that's the type of buyer who snaps this type of thing up. And it had been on the market, how long? Original listing, you kind of feel bad for the seller. So original listing is March. Oh, man. Oh, no. Even older. Really? So it goes back to 2023. June of 2023. Coming soon. Goes under contract by September. And it had been at $740,000. And then that first deal falls apart. And then it's withdrawn. And then the first listing expires in October. Okay. And they've got it listed simultaneously. No, sorry. That's 2023. So it's off the market September 2023. It comes back 6 months later in March of 2024, and then they list it at 700. It goes under contract. Ooh, excitement, 6 days later. But then 2 days after that buyer says, oh no, I didn't want an ugly house. And honey, I just can't deal with this. Like, it functionally works, but I can't imagine coming home to this house every day. Fine, let's pull it off. It goes back to active, and then immediately is withdrawn. Like less than a week later, it's off the market, and then it's withdrawn from March 27th through June 13th, and it's brought back as expired, which is weird, and then it goes from expired back to active, so that's a weird listing.
I'm seeing like some listed for rent as well.
It probably was listed for rent during these time periods because you can't do both.
During 2024, yeah.
Okay, so it's now in active status from June to August of 2024, and they pull it off in August and withdraw it. And the listing expires in August, at the end of August. It's completely expired. Withdrawn at the beginning of August and fully expired at the end of August. Maybe they had it rented for a 6-month period. It's back brought on. Nope, that's the whole expired. It's brought on again in January of this year, offered now at $679. So for those of you still listening to this, that's $21,000 below the previous list price in January of this year. And it went under contract 9 days later, and it did sell and closed February 5th at $675. Whew, what a journey of multiple years of trying to sell it and renting it. Don't know. We're not going to go into which agents were part of this process, but there's a good chance the agents got fired along the way. That happens when sellers are disappointed. This last agent that sold it, I know very, very well, and I know the buy side agent too. It's a small town. Both are competent agents, so no fault to agents, at least on the last listing. Supposedly newer windows, new carpet and paint, updated electrical panel, and marketed it as the lowest 4-bed, 4-bath in the city of Boulder. And sure enough, boom, it sold. So that's the story on the deal. And when you look at the photos of that Soviet-style exterior, the insides aren't bad. It's nicely staged. The kitchen looks like it's original and needs to be completely gutted, but fits the budget and probably will work for a family that needs it and wants to keep it.
And that design is functional.
It's functional. It's just, probably original. From 1967 cabinetry, but the stove and the dishwasher and the fridge are new. The windows are going to be newer. The light fixtures are newer than the 60s.
Yeah. Oh, we've got some of that wood paneling in the basement. And it looks like a sauna in the basement.
Yeah. Wood paneling, probably a owner conversion of the basement to finish the basement. So I will tell you, this is exactly the type of property my parents would have bought as immigrants to the United States in 1971 because it fits the budget. It's safe. It allows them to raise a family. It's in a good location. It's just aesthetically unpleasing, and it's cheap. So, and compared to where they had been living as college students and medical students, it's fantastic. So that's the type of property we're looking at. It's just if you don't live in Boulder, $675 for this feels egregiously offensive. But if you are familiar with Boulder real estate, this is a screaming deal. The clubhouse has some interesting architecture actually, with vaulted ceilings.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
A little workout room, a place to go, play pool and play ping pong. I mean, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Little carport, no garage.
No car. Yeah, one car carport. Yeah. Park your bikes inside. That's my pro tip.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to our last one, and this is one little oddball of a property that's just such a unique little gem that we thought we'd write about it because you don't see or talk about it. We're not writing about it. You don't see this type of thing that often.
Yeah, you really want to. Take us away.
Okay, so Rollinsville is a tiny little historic town that is south of Nederland. So drive up to Ned on Boulder Canyon, and then head south on the Peak to Peak Highway, and you will run smack into Rollinsville. There isn't really much in Rollinsville. Various types of businesses have been tried over the last 20 plus years that I have been tracking. 25 years I've been tracking what's been going on in Boulder real estate. And I've had some friends live in Rollinsville. It's kind of even hippier than Nederland, but I've never done a deal in Rollinsville. And this particular property features about 3/4 of an acre and a home built in the 70s, 1973 to be precise, and about 2,000 total square feet. It's just a 2-bed, 2-bath house, and the listing is marketed as being priced so low because of its as-is condition and deferred maintenance. It was listed under $400,000, $398,500.
Honest seller. Yep.
What's that?
Honest seller, right? As is and deferred maintenance.
Well,
right.
I mean, this is one of those things about managing expectations. Because if you made it look too good and people drove all the way up there, you're just wasting your time and theirs. Because there are people that will pay money for deferred maintenance, and they would like to do their own updates. They will gladly take the low price and gut it themselves and make it home. Or maybe it's a second home for them. They want their little writer's cabin in the Colorado mountains. Or maybe they've got a kid that comes to see you and they want a place to hang out for a few weeks of the year. And they're totally fine with something built in the 70s. They have no problem with that. They know it's really easy to get to Nederland. And there's spectacular hiking just up Rollinsville Pass. So high probability this is someone's vacation home. But who knows what they chose to buy it, why they chose to buy it. I look at the cinder block foundation and I see what look like pretty clear signs of repointing of the cinder block to point out some potential areas for closer due diligence. I also know the cost to insure in the mountains is much, much higher than it used to be, but it's only $398,500. They did manage to negotiate another $12,000 or so off the price. $15,000 off the price, and it looks like they did not have any additional concessions. Also looked like it was an estate sale. So this type of thing. There are buyers for this, and they're not a lot though, right? Because
my mom would love this.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. There are people that want to go up in the mountains in the summer and be in the cool air and spend time with their family and have a little experience, right? A little Swiss Mountain Robinson or whatever fantasy that was right around the time that show came out. Was this time this home was built. John Denver.
Well over my head.
Live in the woods, whatever fantasy you got going on. That's what this is. So listed in October for $429. It went under contract pretty quickly and then went back to active. So the first buyer bailed out, was back to active, and then went under contract about a month later. Second buyer bailed out, and then it went back to active in January, and buyer number 3 was the lucky buyer. The real question is, did buyer number 3 ask for the termination notices from deal number 1 and deal number 2? And I can tell you, you should do that. Why not? Due diligence docs. There's a section in there. I would say please we would like to see the termination notices of deal 1 and deal 2, because what happens if deal 1 terminated for a structural issue that your inspector missed, and deal 2 terminated because it turns out the neighbor is a Nazi and likes to fly the Nazi flag at 10 in the morning, and you weren't there at 10 in the morning to see it, and now you're choosing to live next to a Nazi. I mean, you should know these things. And asking for termination notices, there's no reason you can't ask. And if they don't give them to you, well, it certainly begs the question of what's the truth. And that's what I would want to know on this particular deal, is why did 2 deals earlier terminate for a property that is so inexpensively priced? I mean, this is below dirt value.
We can only speculate.
Yeah. So, okay, that's deal number 3. Lovely drone photo, by the way, Hamish. I was thinking that too. So I think it's a real sunset. So congrats for capturing an amazing photo. I mean, they oversaturated it, right? Like, let's be critical of this photo. Look how green the grass is, and look how blue the mountains are. And
let's
yellow
be critical.
And red. Like that. It captures the eye. I don't think it's fake in a complete fake way that we see sometimes.
No,
I just think
it's just edited.
It's just edited for drama. So there you go.
That concludes sales.
Yeah, that's 191 Assay Office Road in Rollinsville. I don't think I mentioned the address. Okay, let's talk about the news. In this segment, we touch base on news items that we think will have some bearing on our real estate markets. And the first one that caught our attention was Grok 3. So it doesn't really matter whether you are using Claude or ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Grok, and I know a lot of people have feelings about TikTok given its owner, and that's perfectly fine.
Not TikTok.
X, TikTok, same thing. But I play around in various forms, and Grok 3 was released, and I test drove it, and I was astonished at how good it was and how easily it could converse in friendly language, and it's useful as a teaching device. I think it's going to completely, not just Grok 3, but all AI is going to radically change education, because when you have a teacher that can engage one-on-one with you like that and go really deep and actually be what appears to be accurate on, oh my man, limitless topics, it's just going to change so much. And in the real estate world, we've talked about AI a bunch of times already on this pod. I think we're going to keep talking about it. And this is the first time I've just been blown away by how good AI was. So, initially I was like, oh, it's just better search. And now I'm saying, boy, I think it could be used as a teaching tool. And I think it's going to go way beyond that, Hamish. And there's going to be systems to do our jobs and have senior level people that are available to review the process for you, but cut out a lot of cost in real estate transactions, particularly as it goes to things like explaining the contract. Like, why do you need an agent to explain the contract when Grok can do it even better and do it in probably 100 different languages? That is saying something. So I just wanted to bring it to people's attention that if you're not playing with these AI models, you should be, because your industry is also everybody's industries are going to be affected. I think the hype is real, and for a while I was kind of like, it's just another hype cycle. It's not. I think it could be as large as like the Industrial Revolution and how it changed the nature of work for most people. And I think the nature of work 10 years from now, just like we talked about real estate transactions, thinking about what does the world look like in 10 years, I think in 10 years the world is going to look so different that we won't recognize how different it will look in 10 years. And Grok 3 was the first time I had that, oh wow, this is something. We better get really good at podcasting and figure out how to we don't directly make money from podcasting, but it's quite possible real estate agents will be completely out of a job in 5 years because of AI. At least real estate agents as we know them today.
I know. It's like, as we know them today, we talked about this not too long ago, and I brought up like intuition and a few other things, and I mean, at the rate of advancement and everything, very well. I maintain hope. I also think there's a broader conversation that starts to need to be happening with AI as it starts to replace more and more people's jobs. We need to think about kind of systematic changes to the way we live. If the sell, as far as I've known, for technology has been that it's eventually going to make it so we don't have to work anymore. We're not in a world or a society where you have to work, unless you've got a nest egg or something. You've got to make a living. And I just, that's not being discussed, what happens when everybody's rendered obsolete, But going off of the Grok 3 and the Chat GPT and everything, I'm now searching, Grok 3 versus GPT versus DeepSeek versus. And it seems to depend on what link you click on and which is the best. But they're all advancing at an incredible rate,
When it comes to housing, people need to be able to afford to buy the housing.
Mm-hmm.
And if people don't have jobs and they're just living off of universal basic income, who's going to support the housing market? Right? Like, how
is
does
there
that...
a need for a housing market if, how homes are being built entirely by robots and everything's taken care of? Then what are we to do? How is there... it quickly gets a lot more philosophical very fast.
Well, one thing's clear, it's going to be a time of turmoil, a time of radical change.
Yeah.
The next 10 to 20 years, I don't even know what to think. It's just things are going to change. And I think about how I learned. So I spent some time looking at like philosophy. I asked it philosophical questions, like what's the meaning of life? How do you live a meaningful and purposeful life? I also asked it questions about various poems and poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was coming up with is better than anything I've ever seen from anybody.
Yeah.
And instantly, like there was no delay. Yeah. That was just astonishing. And I think about all the time I spent as a child bored out of my mind in a classroom structure versus a one-on-one teaching session on a topic that I needed to learn certain things and used Grok or whatever AI as a teacher that would basically not shame me and would teach me at my pace.
Yeah. And break it down when you needed a breakdown or however.
Things, and could test me, did you get this? And wouldn't be like, oh, not again, you didn't get this? Like, let's do it again. Let's break it down again. I think it's going to revolutionize that. And if that's available globally, it's just, it's one of these, oh my God moments. Like, this is so different. And we just don't even know how much this is going to change the world right now.
Yeah. We should be talking about it.
We're gonna,
I'm thankful that our government is young and spry and very technologically capable and knows about all these things,
Yeah, I love your sarcasm, Hamish. That's great. Well, maybe the next president won't be in his 80s. We will find out after this one. Okay, so we're going to keep talking about it on the pod and expect us to keep bringing it up. In particular, when there are new tools coming down the line for real estate, I think we'll be looking at that specifically, but I think we will also be talking about AI in general because we have to stay on top of it, not just for our own well-being, but because it's in line with there's just so much change happening. We need to dive into it to help our dear listeners think about it too. But this is clearly the first time I remember having this awe feeling. Like this, wow, holy cow feeling. So, all right, next news item. So there's been a student missing whose body has now been recovered. And it sparked a lot of fear in Boulder over a potential criminal or criminals that did things that resulted in the death of this student. And since the body's been recovered, the Boulder County coroner says there is no risk to the public, nor has there been risk to the public from this situation, which sort of indicates, you can read through the lines there, that it's probably a suicidal as to suicide. Possibly, we don't know what happened, but that language they chose to use hopefully calms the community. And it's always a tragic loss when people die, but it particularly is a tragic loss when it's somebody so young who passed away. School is still a very stressful thing, and mental health is not just something that affects older folks. It affects everyone. We don't know what the backstory is other than it's a tragic situation, and it's something that a lot of our community is feeling here in the city of Boulder. And I will bring this back to real estate, and whenever we work with parents that are buying a place for their CU student, this often happens when they realize how expensive renting is in the city of Boulder. They look at possibly buying something. So I close sometimes 3 or 4 units in a year. This year it looks like we're already going to be at 2, off to a good start. And it's safety and security is something that, even though it doesn't appear to be the case here where there was an outside person who murdered the CU student, but safety is something that parents need to think about when they're looking at housing options, renting or buying for their CU students. And there are some locations and commute patterns that your student will take that will put them closer to potentially risky situations. We also have free options to transport students around campus and beyond throughout the city that have existed for years. Boulder as a whole is generally a pretty safe place, but that doesn't mean bad things don't happen. And and the classic example from a real estate perspective is how often I've had parents not want to buy a place that had a glass sliding door on the main because they felt like and it's usually daughters, they felt like their daughter was just too exposed to a random break-in. And that they wouldn't feel comfortable buying a property that wasn't in a better location or didn't have better security around the property for easy entry. So we're always happy to talk to our clients about their deepest concerns whenever they buy a property, and safety and security and distance from criminal potential activity is something that your agent should bring up. You should not be waiting. I never wait. I always bring it up. Like, how important is this safety issue? How important is safety for you with respect to your student? And if it is a big deal, then we may not want to look at anything close to downtown. And the east side of town is not the party zone. And of course, random criminal activity happens, but there's certainly a lot more property crime on the hill. And then there is, and way bigger parties than on what I think of as the more serious side of Boulder housing for students, and that's the east side.
Yeah, really, really sad news.
Super sad.
Just like, yeah, really. And I mean, being that we're so connected to Boulder and everything, it cuts deep. So, yeah, proper tragedy.
Yeah. Okay, our next news item, and we're just going to cover this very superficially, and it's mostly in response to those that say Boulder isn't doing anything about homelessness. And Boulder just had a very lengthy study session with, what did I say, 250 pages was the report.
180.
180. Yeah. 188-page report that is available on the city website. We will provide it to you in a link. They spent like 75 or 80 grand on this study, and it shows how much money we've been spending, in what ways are we making progress. I mean, certainly we're spending money. We went from spending about $800,000 to spending $10 million over an 8-year period. That's an annual expenditure. So we are devoting a lot of resources to try to solve the homeless issue in the city of Boulder. And if you are concerned with that, we'll put that link in. We could have an entire podcast on the topic, and we're not going to do that now.
Yeah. We'll continue to touch it as the podcasts go, as we have been.
Absolutely. And the last item is there was an interesting piece in CPR about governments that are pushing back on the state mandates for denser housing in certain locations and are stating they will not comply. So it looks like we are getting set. Yeah, it looks like we are getting set for some lawsuits to occur against the state for their new laws that require higher density housing, particularly along transit corridors. And there's some rather choice quotes in that article, Hamish. Do you want to read the one that we were laughing about?
Oh, shoot, maybe. Oh, let's see if I can find it. It's something about the Soviet bloc, or kind of back into what you were saying on that Table Mesa attached dwelling. I'm having a hard time finding it between all this. Christine Ireland, though, has some. She's been saying some stuff. She's
Who is she?
I think she's a city council member for Westminster, which is where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not finding the Soviet era block quote, but it was.
Well, it wasn't that.
Pretty funny.
There was something else she said about it just being completely ridiculous.
Everyone's gonna flee the state in droves because people want single family homes.
Yeah.
But
no. Here it is. Everyone's. Yeah. I want to know who the state thinks is going to live in these 50,000 units, and that's what would increase in Westminster if they complied. Everyone's going to flee the state in droves because people want single-family houses, she added. That's why people are leaving the state. They don't want to live in apartments from birth to death. I saw this stuff in Russia, and it was built under Lenin. And having a goal of 50,506 units, however, does not necessarily mean that 50,506 units will be built. That's clarification from CPR. So, in any event, you can see that there's some pushback happening.
There is it mentions home rule cities, and I wonder if that's worth a deeper look in the next pod. But it's to do where these cities can, their laws like supersede state laws, and I think about Ward when I hear that.
And we've had people we've talked to, clients that wanted to go deep into home rule versus state, and it honestly is not something I fully understand. So if there's a podcast listener who does understand this and has the credentials to back it up and would like to educate us on home rule, would like to understand it further, but at the end of the day, we're not going to be in this fight. We're just going to watch it from the sidelines. And if there's a lawsuit, it's the courts that are going to decide the extent of home rule over local jurisdictions. Yeah. So I was surprised when I heard about home rule from this individual that was a client of ours, and the extent that she believed it offered protection to do whatever she wanted in Ward. I was very skeptical, and I had expressed that to them. And I don't know how that potential project worked out because we excused ourselves from it. So, okay, so that is some local governments are fighting state-level mandates on housing density. And with that wraps up our little In the News section.
It was a news speed run, Oz. We started at 2 minutes on the time code, 2 hours and 1 minute, and we finished in 8 minutes, all four.
Well, I didn't want to go into massive detail on any of these. It's just these are some interesting news items. I feel like we hit the core, and we don't need to have...
And if you want to know more, the links are in the description, and... Yeah.
Plus, there's not much we can say because I don't have a stance on home rule. And I don't have a stance on how the city has been spending homelessness, other than I think it's worth paying attention to it. And that study may answer some questions people have, particularly those who think we're not doing anything or we're not doing things effectively, which I'm in that latter camp. I don't think we're effective. But I also am not about to read a 180-page study in preparation for the pod. So I looked at that dollar amount and I'm like, holy cow, we're spending a lot of money. And then as far as the death of the CU student, it's just tragic. It's just what else are you supposed to say? Those poor parents.
Reading the quotes off of that, cut deep. Yeah. Yeah, so, that was really...
Okay, so let's hit the fun part of our podcast now that we hit the saddest part of our podcast. And that is our
full
carve-outs.
well recognizing, yeah.
That is our carve-outs. And I think you should lead, Hamish, because the placeholder that you put in here for your carve-out, I've got questions about.
So the placeholder says Jesus was also a carpenter. And it's in jest, and I don't think it's meant to be disrespectful or anything, but if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice behind me my background's changed. I've rotated my office, basically all the furniture in it, counterclockwise 90 degrees. And so behind me is a closet. Before last week, I didn't have closet doors, so I couldn't have this orientation. It wouldn't, look the part. It wouldn't look professional. Just be a bunch of clothes back there. Well, the closet opening was for sliding doors, and the closet doors that I got were an inch too big, so they don't shut all the way. And that brought in the need to do some woodworking. And here we are.
So you cut down the closet doors to fit.
Well, I'm going to have to. Yeah, the plan is to do that on Friday. And I've got plans to do kind of like a pergola and stuff in the backyard, and I've been shopping for probably the last year and a half on some tools. You know, I need a chop saw, I need a table saw, and probably a few other things. But those two were the big ones, and I scored myself a deal. I got a table saw, a Cobalt portable one for $60, and I got a 12-inch miter saw extendable for $80. So I'm now in the world of home improvements as far as like woodworking goes and cutting stuff to fit. I could put together a chicken coop if I wanted to now, but that's my carve out, is really just excitement to get into some wood.
Can I, having worked in construction for a brief period and seen some horrific injuries, can I request that you watch some YouTube videos on how to use these things safely? Because you could easily cut off a finger or a hand or kill yourself by cutting into a artery with those tools. They are
without a doubt
dangerous tools. Okay.
Yeah, I took a few wood shop classes in school, and then actually before the pod, like 5 minutes before the pod, I was looking at a like overview of a table saw video. Yeah,
I love.
Shoot, I could ask Grok.
You could ask Grok. I love Essential Craftsman. I don't know if you've ever watched that.
You've recommended him to me. Yeah,
he's sort of grandpa style. You know, like it's an older gentleman who's worked in trades for his life. He's been at GC, has made money with his hands, and he has some old-fashioned things he says sometimes, which anger my spouse, my lovely bride, and some of the things I think he is a little cisgendered in his mentality, but he's also probably 70 years old and grew up in a very different world. And knowing that going in might help you be less offended by his stranded gender approach. But he's awesome. I really like Essential Craftsman. His good old common sense approach to doing things and reworking things and fixing things and building things. I mean, I think we spent half the pandemic watching his videos.
No, I'm really excited. Like I've been wanting to, I could redo the trim around the windows now. I've got the tools to start cutting stuff up. So this summer might be a really interesting home improvement summer. I'll say stay tuned. The first thing I'm doing though is ripping these closet doors about an inch, and they should close flush. I don't think that's any equity into the home, but it's a project.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not the height, it's the width of the closet doors. So you're just going to rip one door?
I was going to do both of them, a marginal amount. So I think it's like half an inch per side.
And there's enough meat on the bone for that?
Just barely. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
There's not enough meat if I do 1 inch on one side and leave the other. So
okay. All
skin of my teeth over here.
I look forward to seeing how that pans out.
Hopefully it's not an expensive mistake, but we'll see.
And I also have a lot of tools. If you need to borrow something, I probably have it. I don't have a table saw, but I have a chop saw.
I got you now.
I have a skill saw. Yeah, for sure. Very useful. Okay.
I'll definitely reach out. Thank you. Yeah.
You good with your carve out? Anything else you want to add? I'm complete.
No, that's about it. I've got a little bit more to talk about next week, but that's it for now.
Okay. Well, my carve out is I just got back into town from Florida, and my lovely parents are, I think, 81 and 79, and I wanted to spend a few days with them to connect, and did a little video, which is private, and it won't be shared, but it's a video where I ask questions about their childhood and their experiences in medical school and what it was like for them coming to the United States in 1971, and having it on video is so powerful for future generations and even my memory. And I know at some point they won't be around anymore. And I know I'll also have this little video that I get to watch to see what it was like with my parents. So video is so much richer and more powerful than still imagery. And we've invested together, you and I and the company House Einstein has invested so much resources and equipment and skill building. And so learning to interview, too, is something I want to get better at. And eventually, we will start to have guests on the pod. So that was a really cool part of the trip. And then every year, my friends and I get together and attend. Well, this is the second year. So for 2 years in a row, we've attended a regional Burning Man event called Love Burn in Miami. And Leah and I, my wife and I, also serve as rangers at this event. And this was her first year serving as a ranger. And it was just spectacular. The weather was really warm, humid. I would say it was hot, damp, tropical. You
just
swim on the
at
beach.
This point. Yeah.
People and it's 11 degrees when I woke up this morning here at my house. So it was really nice to get away for a couple of days and attend Love Burn and see so many of our close friends and connect with them. We see them basically twice a year. And I always come away really changed and grateful for the opportunity to help create the event, help the event run smoother as a ranger, and also help my camp put together their offering, which is we're a healing camp, and although I'm not involved directly with body work and chiropractic and acupuncture and all the different modalities, you can imagine, our camp offers, and they're often Western medical doctors also offering services as part of our camp. That's really cool, and I always come away with a new perspective and a deeper appreciation for these friendships. And there's so few ways that adults get to play and truly play. And these regional burns, as well as the big burn, are a big piece of that for me and my wife and all of our friends. And I keep trying to invite my siblings to come, but I think they may be a little too conservative or square to want to
straight and narrow. Yeah,
hang out with a bunch of hippies on the beach.
You could convert them, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know your siblings. Yeah,
I don't know if it's going to happen, but we'll see. So that was Love Burn, and we're back on the ground. Thank you for helping cover. I'm not a huge fan of having to work at these travel events, but the amazing nature of our company is that due to your service as well as Sophie and Ian, I know we've got coverage for all of our clients. So I'm not worried about going out of town, particularly if I'm only a few time zones away. If I'm going overseas, it's way more challenging. But if I'm only on the East Coast,
and even
or on the
then,
West
that's
Coast,
proved itself. Yeah,
that's worked out okay. I'd rather keep close to our time zone when I travel, but bring my laptop, bring my phone, and I can work remotely pretty easily. And there are no dropped balls. So I think it's almost to the point where our clients don't even know if I'm traveling, which is perfectly fine by me, because sometimes I get nervous. I'm like, there's nothing that's going to happen while I'm away that I can't do from a phone and a laptop, as long as I have you on the ground and the other agents on the team. So
yeah, your eyes and ears.
And candle is showing, attend an inspection, attend a septic pump out, or whatever has to happen. All of that is possible with a fantastic team. So thank you, Hamish, for helping cover that. And,
happy to. You've got me this weekend, so.
I do. You're going on a little trip. But, all right, cool. Well, I think that's the end of the House Einstein podcast. Should I do the little closing credit, or would you like to?
You're really good at it.
You're really good at it, Hamish. That's how you get somebody to do it. All right, I'll do it.
Okay.
So thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this 68th House Einstein podcast. And we deeply appreciate your listening. We deeply appreciate your feedback and your comments. And some of those occur personally to us, and it means so much to us when we hear that you have enjoyed it and you got value from it. If you like what you hear, please check out our socials. You can see our YouTube or Instagram or Facebook and X. Do the thing that helps us get more visibility by liking and subscribing. We would so appreciate it if you did that. If you want to check out our business, it's at houseeinstein.com. That's where you can sign up for our newsletter. And that's the only place you will hear us talking about active listings, unless you are actually a client, in which case that's all we're talking about is active listings. And I think with that, I'll just thank you again for joining us, and we wish you well, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.